Elena Vasquez stood at the center of the great hall, her hands trembling slightly as she held the datapad. Around her, the massive chamber buzzed with alien voices speaking in dozens of different languages. The Galactic Council was in session. And once again, humanity was being asked to solve everyone else's problems. 300 years. That was how long humans had been part of the galactic community. 300 years of being the ones everyone called when trouble started. 300 years of giving up their own interests to keep peace between species that seemed to enjoy fighting more than breathing. Ambassador Vasquez, called out War Leader Throck, his massive form rising from the Corvaxi delegation. His gray skin looked like armor plating, and his forearms moved with practiced military precision. The Corvaxi Empire requires compensation for the mining rights lost during the Vega Prime settlement. Elena sighed quietly. The Vega Prime settlement was a human colony that had been established legally, with all proper documents filed with the Galactic Council. But the Corvaxi had decided they wanted the system's asteroid belt for themselves. Rather than fight, humanity had agreed to share the mining rights equally. Now the Corvaxi wanted money because the shared profits were less than what they would have made if they owned everything. Honored War Leader, Elena replied, using the formal tone that diplomacy required. The Vega Prime Accords were signed by all parties. The mining distribution was agreed upon fairly. Thrax's laugh sounded like grinding metal. Fair to humans, perhaps, but the Corvaxi Empire has military expenses. Our ships need fuel. Our weapons need maintenance. These costs are greater than what we receive from the shared mining. From across the hall, Ambassador Zek of the Zephyrian Collective spoke up. The insect-like alien's compound eyes glittered as he clicked his mandibles. The Collective agrees with the Corvaxi concern. The current arrangement does not account for military readiness requirements. Elena felt her jaw tighten. The Zephyrian Collective had the largest trade fleet in the galaxy. They made enormous profits from moving goods between systems. Yet they constantly complained about any arrangement that did not give them additional advantages. Perhaps, came the smooth voice of Nexari Representative Quinn, the human delegation could offer a modification to the current agreement. A gesture of goodwill to address these legitimate concerns. Elena looked up at the observation deck where Admiral Sarah Chen sat with the other military advisors. Chen's face was stone cold as she watched the proceedings. The Admiral's presence was supposed to be ceremonial. Military officials rarely spoke during diplomatic sessions, but Elena could see the tension in Chen's shoulders. This was always how it went. First, one species would raise a complaint about a human colony, trade route, or resource claim. Then others would support that complaint. Finally, the suggestion would come that humans should give up something to make everyone else happy. And humans always said yes, because keeping peace was more important than any single dispute. The datapad in Elena's hands contained humanity's response to this latest demand. It offered to reduce human mining operations by another 15% and provide direct compensation to the Corvaxi Empire for their military expenses. It was the 847th such compromise humanity had offered during Elena's career. The Terran Federation recognizes the concerns raised by our esteemed colleagues, Elena said, reading from the prepared statement. In the interest of maintaining galactic stability, we propose the following modifications. As she spoke, Elena noticed that many of the alien delegates were not even listening. Some were having quiet conversations. Others were checking their personal devices. A few seemed to be dozing. They already knew humans would agree to whatever was asked. They had never said no before. The voting was quick. Every species except humanity voted to accept the new arrangement. The humans, as always, abstained from voting on matters concerning themselves. It was considered more diplomatic that way. After the session ended, Elena gathered her materials slowly. Around her, the alien delegates chatted happily as they filed out. Another successful day of getting what they wanted from the humans. Admiral Chen descended from the observation deck, her military boots clicking sharply on the polished floor. She waited until the hall was nearly empty before speaking. How much this time? Chen asked quietly. Elena checked her calculations. Approximately 2.3 billion credits per year in lost revenue. plus direct payments to the Corvaxi of 800 million annually. Chen nodded grimly. Any military concerns? The Corvaxi are demanding access to 3 more shipping routes through human space. They claim it is for efficient resource transportation. Elena looked up at the Admiral. Those routes pass directly by our defense stations around the Centauri cluster. Chen's expression did not change, but Elena saw her hand clench into a fist. The Centauri cluster contained 12 human colonies with a combined population of nearly 50 million people. They are testing us, Chen said. They have been testing us for decades, Elena replied. Each demand gets a little bigger. Each compromise gives them a little more access to our territory. Chen looked around the empty council chamber. The Great Hall had been built by the Nexari 200 years ago, designed to be beautiful and inspiring. The walls showed murals depicting different species working together peacefully. Humans featured prominently in those murals, always shown as mediators bringing other species together. Do you know what war leader Thrax said to his aide after the vote? Chen asked. Elena shook her head. Our translation systems picked it up. He said, "Humans are useful. Soft, but useful. They will bend before they break, as they always have." Elena felt something cold settle in her stomach. Soft. That was how the galaxy saw humanity. Not peaceful. Not diplomatic. Not wise. Just soft. Admiral, Elena said carefully. What would happen if they pushed too far? If they demanded something we truly could not give? Chen was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was very calm. Elena, do you know why I attend these sessions? To provide military perspective on diplomatic matters. No, Chen said, turning to look directly at Elena. I attend because someone needs to remember what we were before we became diplomats. Someone needs to remember what we chose to put away when we decided to be peacemakers. Elena stared at the Admiral. In her 30 years of diplomatic service, she had never heard Chen speak like this. What did we put away? Elena asked. Chen smiled, but it was not a warm expression. Everything that made us the dominant species on Earth. Everything that let us spread across the galaxy faster than any other race. Everything that the rest of the galaxy has never actually seen. Chen picked up her datapad and headed for the exit. At the doorway, she stopped. They think we are soft, Elena. But there is a difference between choosing not to fight and being unable to fight. They have never learned that difference. I pray to whatever gods are listening that they never force us to teach them. The Admiral left, her footsteps echoing in the empty hall. Elena stood alone, surrounded by murals showing humans as peaceful mediators. For the first time, she wondered what those murals would look like if they showed what humans had been like before they chose peace. Outside the Great Hall, the galaxy continued its daily business, secure in the knowledge that humans would always compromise, always bend, always choose peace over conflict. They had no idea how wrong they were. Captain Maria Santos was drinking her morning coffee when the emergency alarm began screaming throughout her ship. The TNS Mercy was a hospital vessel, painted white with red crosses that every species in the galaxy recognized. For 200 years, no one had ever fired on a medical ship. It was one of the few universal laws that everyone followed. The communication came through on the emergency frequency, cutting through all other signals. All vessels, this is New Eden Colony Control. We are under attack. Repeat, we are under attack. Corvaxi Imperial Fleet has opened fire on civilian targets. Request immediate assistance. 2010 high. Maria dropped her coffee cup. It shattered on the floor. But she did not notice. New Eden was a farming world with 4.2 million people. Most of them were families who had left Earth looking for a quiet life, growing food for the galaxy's hungry populations. Set course for New Eden, maximum speed, Maria ordered, as she rushed to the bridge. Her navigation officer looked confused. Captain, we are 3 days away. At maximum speed. By the time we arrive, set the course, Maria said firmly. The next few hours were the longest of Maria's life. Reports came in every few minutes, each one worse than the last. The Corvaxi fleet was not just attacking military targets, They were systematically destroying everything on the planet. The first target had been the planetary communication array, then the power stations, then the hospitals. Maria watched the reports with growing horror. Children's hospitals were being bombed. Schools were being destroyed while children were still inside. Refugee centers that had been set up for emergencies were being targeted specifically. "Captain," her communications officer called out, "we are receiving a transmission from the Korvaxi fleet. It is being broadcast on all frequencies." The main screen filled with the image of war leader Thrak. He was standing on the bridge of his flagship, wearing full battle armor. Behind him, Maria could see other Korvaxi officers watching displays that showed the bombing of New Eden. "Citizens of the galaxy," Thrak said, his voice proud and strong. "Today, the Korvaxi Empire demonstrates the price of threats to imperial security. The human colony on New Eden was established in violation of Korvaxi strategic interests. Its proximity to our borders represented a clear and present danger to imperial safety." Maria felt sick. New Eden was 12 light-years from the nearest Korvaxi outpost. It was a farming world with no military installations, no weapons, no defenses of any kind. The destruction of this colony serves as a warning to all who would challenge Korvaxi supremacy. "We will tolerate no threats to our empire, no matter how small or seemingly innocent." The transmission continued for 20 minutes. Thrak explained in detail how the attack was being carried out. He showed footage of the bombing runs. He pointed out the efficiency of Korvaxi military operations. He seemed proud of what his forces were doing. When the transmission ended, Maria sat in stunned silence. In 300 years of galactic civilization, nothing like this had ever happened. Wars were fought between military forces. Colonies were conquered, not destroyed. Civilians were captured or relocated, not systematically murdered. 2 days later, the TNS Mercy reached New Eden. Maria had been preparing for mass casualties, expecting to find wounded survivors who needed medical attention. What she found was worse than she had imagined. There were no survivors. The entire planet had been burned. Cities were nothing but ash and melted metal. Farms had been destroyed with weapons that poisoned the soil. Even the water had been contaminated. "Captain," her medical officer reported, "we are detecting no life signs anywhere on the planet. The atmosphere has been made toxic. Nothing could survive down there." Maria ordered her ship to scan for escape pods, emergency shelters, anything that might have protected people during the attack. They found nothing. The Korvaxi had been thorough. As the TNS Mercy orbited the dead world, 3 more medical ships arrived. They came from different human colonies, all rushing to help. They all found the same thing: nothing left to save. Captain Rodriguez of the TNS Hope sent a message to Maria's ship. "What do we do now? There is nothing here. No one to help." Before Maria could answer, new ships began arriving. Korvaxi warships, moving in formation. Maria counted 12 heavy cruisers and 2 battleships. "Attention human vessels," came a transmission from the Korvaxi fleet commander. "You are trespassing in an active military zone. Depart immediately or face destruction." Maria looked at the 4 medical ships on her scanner. They were hospital vessels, clearly marked with medical symbols. Under galactic law, they had the right to provide humanitarian aid anywhere in the galaxy. "Korvaxi, Commander," Maria replied. "We are medical vessels operating under humanitarian protocols. We are searching for survivors who may require assistance." The Korvaxi commander's laugh was cold. "There are no survivors. That was the point. Depart now." Captain Rodriguez sent another message. "They cannot attack medical ships. It is against every law in the galaxy." Rodriguez was wrong. The first missiles hit the TNS Hope exactly 30 seconds later. The hospital ship exploded in a ball of fire that lit up the dark space around New Eden. 300 medical personnel died instantly. "All human ships," the Korvaxi commander announced. "You have 10 seconds to begin departure or you will be destroyed." The 3 remaining medical ships began moving away from New Eden as fast as possible. But the Korvaxi ships were faster. One by one, They hunted down the hospital vessels and destroyed them. Maria's ship was last. As the final missiles hit the TNS Mercy, her last thought was that someone needed to tell Earth what had happened here. But no one needed to tell Earth. The Korvaxi had broadcast the entire attack across the galaxy. They had shown the destruction of New Eden live on every communication network. They had shown the hunting and destruction of the medical ships. They wanted everyone to see what happened when someone crossed the Korvaxi Empire. The galactic reaction was exactly what Thrak had expected. The Zephyrian Collective issued a statement expressing concern about the escalation of violence, but took no action. The Nexari Commonwealth called for measured responses from all parties, while continuing their trade agreements with the Korvaxi Empire. The Galactic Council scheduled an emergency debate about the incident. The debate was set for 3 weeks later, to give all delegates time to study the situation properly. No one offered to send aid to human colonies that might be threatened. No one suggested sanctions against the Korvaxi Empire. No one did anything except issue careful statements that blamed both sides for the tragic misunderstanding. But something else was happening that the galaxy did not notice at first. Human ships throughout space began changing their behavior. Trade vessels that had been following predictable routes suddenly altered course. Diplomatic ships that had been traveling to various meetings simply disappeared. On Earth, Admiral Chen received a priority message from deep space. It was brief and coded. New Eden lost. All souls lost. Medical vessels destroyed. Korvaxi broadcast complete massacre as propaganda. Galaxy silent. Chen read the message 3 times. Then she walked to her safe and removed a small device she had hoped never to use. She placed her palm on the scanner and spoke clearly. Admiral Sarah Chen. Authorization code Omega-7. Activate Protocol Crimson. Across human space, military commanders received the same message simultaneously. Protocol Crimson meant the end of humanity's 300-year experiment in peaceful diplomacy. On the outer edge of human territory, the research station Trinity received Admiral Chen's message. The station's commander, Colonel James Park, read the authorization and turned to his crew. "Gentlemen," he said quietly, "remove the covers from all weapon systems. Begin charging the main batteries. Send recall messages to all human civilian vessels. As of this moment, we are at war." The men and women of Trinity Station had been waiting for this moment their entire careers. They had trained for it, prepared for it, hoped it would never come. Now, it was here. In the depths of space, hidden installations that the galaxy had never detected began powering up systems that had been dormant for centuries. Ships that looked like cargo haulers began revealing weapon ports that had been carefully concealed. Research stations activated defense grids that could level continents. The galaxy had crossed a line that humanity had drawn in secret 300 years ago. They had attacked human civilians, murdered human medical personnel, and done it all as entertainment for the galaxy to watch. Now they were about to learn the difference between choosing peace and being incapable of war. The age of human diplomacy was over. The age of human warfare was about to begin, and the galaxy had no idea what they had unleashed upon themselves. The Galactic Council emergency session was called for the first time in 50 years. Representatives from every major species hurried to the Great Hall, unsure what to expect. The human delegation's seats sat empty. Ambassador Elena Vasquez had been recalled to Earth 3 days ago, along with every other human diplomat in the galaxy. No explanation had been given. The human embassy building stood vacant, its communication arrays dark and silent. "Where are they?" demanded War Leader Thrak as he took his place in the Korvaxi delegation. "The humans called for this session. They should be here to explain themselves." Nexari Representative Quinn tapped nervously at his datapad. "Our intelligence networks report unusual human ship movements throughout the galaxy. Trade vessels have disappeared from their normal routes. Research stations have stopped responding to communications." Zephyrian Ambassador Zek clicked his mandibles anxiously. "The collective has lost contact with several human trading partners. Ships that were scheduled to arrive at our ports simply never came." The Great Hall buzzed with worried conversations. For 300 years, Humans had been the most predictable species in the galaxy. They went where they were supposed to go, did what they were supposed to do, and always answered their communications. This silence was completely unlike them. Then the screens activated. Every display in the hall, every communication device, every personal data pad suddenly showed the same image. It was not coming through normal diplomatic channels. It was being broadcast simultaneously to every inhabited world in the galaxy. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in what was clearly a military command center. Behind her, officers in uniforms that most aliens had never seen worked at stations displaying tactical information. The Admiral wore insignia that even galactic military experts did not recognize. To the people of the galaxy, Admiral Chen began, her voice carrying a coldness that made seasoned warriors uncomfortable. For 3 centuries, humanity chose peace. We mediated your wars, absorbed your aggression, and sacrificed our own interests for galactic stability. We believed that reason and compassion could triumph over hatred and greed. The Admiral paused, looking directly into the camera with eyes that seemed to see through the screen and into the soul of every person watching. We were wrong. War Leader Thrak shifted uneasily in his seat. Something about the human's tone was different from the diplomatic voices he was used to hearing. This was not the voice of someone asking for compromise. 4 days ago, Admiral Chen continued, the Corvaxi Empire committed an act of genocide against the civilian population of New Eden. 4.2 million innocent people were murdered for the entertainment of those who watched the broadcasts. Medical vessels operating under galactic humanitarian law were hunted down and destroyed. Quinn looked around the council chamber. Several delegates were checking their data pads, confirming that their governments had indeed received copies of the Corvaxi broadcasts. No one had thought to delete them. They had been too busy calculating how the incident might affect their own trade agreements. The response of the galactic community has been silence. Statements of concern, calls for measured responses, scheduled debates set for 3 weeks after the genocide occurred. The Admiral's voice remained perfectly calm, but something in her expression made even Thrak uncomfortable. He had seen that look before, in the eyes of predators just before they struck. Therefore, effective immediately, the Terran Federation formally declares a state of war with the Corvaxi Empire and any nation that provides them aid, comfort, or shelter. The council chamber erupted in shocked voices. Wars were declared in the council chamber, with formal procedures and careful diplomatic language. They were not announced through universal broadcasts. Admiral Chen raised her hand, and somehow the gesture commanded silence across the galaxy. All diplomatic, trade, and communication ties with the Corvaxi Empire are permanently severed. Any vessel bearing Corvaxi transponders will be considered hostile and will be destroyed. Any world harboring Corvaxi military assets will be considered a legitimate target for immediate military action. Zephyrian intelligence agent Kress leaned over to his superior. Sir, do we have any current intelligence on human military capabilities? Real capabilities? Not what they show us in their diplomatic meetings? The question hung in the air like a death sentence. The truth was that no one knew anything about actual human military strength. Humans had been so peaceful for so long that intelligence services had stopped watching them. Why spy on a species that never fought anyone? Admiral Chen was not finished. For 3 centuries, we have served as peacekeepers while you prepared for war. You assumed that our peaceful nature meant we were incapable of violence. You mistook our choice for weakness. Behind the Admiral, one of the officers handed her a data pad. She glanced at it and nodded. You spent those 300 years building weapons and training armies to fight each other. We spent those 300 years building weapons and training armies to fight all of you, at once, and win. The temperature in the council chamber seemed to drop several degrees. Delegate after delegate realized the same terrifying thing. No one had ever seen human military exercises. No one had ever been invited to observe human fleet maneuvers. No one had ever been allowed to visit human military installations. We learned something important during our 5,000 years of warfare on Earth. Admiral Chen continued. Peace is not the absence of conflict. Peace is the presence of overwhelming force in the hands of those who choose not to use it. Thrak stood up abruptly. You threaten the entire galaxy? Your own ships are outnumbered 1,000 to 1. Every species will unite against you." Admiral Chen smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "War Leader Thrak, you are welcome to try. Please remember that you are the ones who taught us that galactic law means nothing. You are the ones who showed us that civilians are legitimate targets. You are the ones who demonstrated that medical vessels can be hunted for sport." The Admiral gestured to someone off-screen. A new display appeared, showing a star chart of the galaxy. "We have spent 300 years learning your weaknesses, mapping your trade routes, infiltrating your communication networks, and positioning assets throughout your territory. While you watched us be diplomats, we were preparing for the war you would eventually force upon us." Red dots began appearing on the star chart. Hundreds of them, then thousands. They marked human assets that had been hidden throughout the galaxy, disguised as research stations, communication relays, and trading posts. You never wondered why humans were willing to take the worst trade routes, the positions closest to dangerous space, the assignments no one else wanted? Admiral Chen asked. "We have been surrounding you for 3 centuries. The implications hit the galactic delegates like a physical blow. Human research stations were located near every major military installation in the galaxy. Human communication relays sat along every important trade route. Human trading posts were positioned within striking distance of every capital world." Nexari Commonwealth Admiral Vex stood up slowly. His species prided itself on strategic thinking and military planning. He stared at the display showing human positions and realized with growing horror what he was looking at. "This is not a war declaration," he said quietly. "This is a surrender demand." Admiral Chen nodded approvingly. "The Nexari have always been the quickest to understand military realities." "Yes, Admiral Vex. This is exactly what it is." She turned back to face the camera directly. "The Korvaxi Empire will surrender unconditionally within 72 hours, or we will demonstrate what human warfare actually looks like. Any species that interferes will be included in our demonstration." The transmission began to end. But Admiral Chen had one final statement. "We spent 300 years learning to be good neighbors. Before that, we spent 5,000 years learning to be very, very good at war. You chose which version of humanity you wanted to meet." The screens went dark. The council chamber sat in complete silence for several long minutes. Finally, Zephyrian intelligence agent Kress spoke the question everyone was thinking. What do we actually know about human military history? From before they joined the galactic community? The answer came from Nexari historian Dr. Yal, who had spent decades studying pre-contact human records. They conquered their own planet through constant warfare. They developed weapons capable of destroying their entire world. They created military doctrines based on the assumption that they would always be outnumbered and would need to fight multiple enemies simultaneously. Dr. Yal paused, checking his datapad with trembling hands. Their most basic military principle is something they call overwhelming force. They do not fight to win. They fight to make sure the enemy never wants to fight again. War leader Thrak, who had commanded Korvaxi fleets in dozens of battles, felt something he had never experienced before. Pure, cold fear. The galaxy had just discovered that they had spent 3 centuries being protected by the most dangerous species any of them had ever encountered, and they had just made that species very, very angry. Korvaxi Fleet Admiral Grak commanded the largest battle formation in the Empire's history. 200 warships spread across space in perfect attack formation, moving toward the human research station at Kepler 442. Intelligence reports said the station was lightly defended by a handful of human ships. "Today we show the galaxy that the Korvaxi Empire fears no one," Grak announced to his fleet. "These humans think they can threaten us with words and hidden bases. We will crush their pathetic force and broadcast their destruction just as we did at New Eden." The research station appeared on his sensors. It looked exactly like every other human research facility. A collection of laboratories and communication arrays with a few small ships docked alongside. The only unusual thing was that one of the ships was much larger than normal research vessels. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "the large vessel is identifying itself as the TNS Retribution. It appears to be some kind of heavy cruiser." Grak laughed. "One heavy cruiser against 200 Korvaxi warships. The humans had finally given them a proper battle. "Signal the human ship," Grak ordered. "Tell them to surrender, and we will make their deaths quick." The response came immediately. It was a single word. "No." "Very well," Grak said. "All ships. Attack formation. Target the human vessel. Show them the power of the Korvaxi Empire." The first indication that something was wrong came when the human research station began to change. Panels that looked like solar collectors folded back to reveal massive weapons arrays. Communication dishes reconfigured into targeting systems. What had appeared to be a peaceful research facility was actually a heavily armed fortress, but that was nothing compared to what happened to the TNS Retribution. The ship's hull began to unfold like a flower opening. Sections that had seemed to be cargo holds revealed themselves as weapon bays. The single heavy cruiser suddenly became something that dwarfed anything in the Korvaxi fleet. "Sir," the tactical officer said, his voice shaking. "The human vessel is larger than our 3 biggest battleships combined, and it is covered with weapons we do not recognize." Grak stared at the displays. The human ship was not just big, it was impossibly big. How had they hidden something that size? How had their sensors failed to detect its true nature? "All ships, open fire," Grak commanded. 200 Korvaxi warships unleashed their full firepower on the human vessel. Missiles, energy beams, and kinetic rounds filled space with deadly light. Any normal ship would have been vaporized instantly. The TNS Retribution was completely undamaged. "Sir," came a terrified voice from the sensor station. "Their shields are not even straining. Our weapons are having no effect whatsoever." The human ship had not moved during the attack. It had simply absorbed everything the Korvaxi could throw at it. Now, it began to respond. The Retribution's first salvo destroyed 12 Korvaxi ships instantly. The weapons it used were unlike anything in the galactic databases. They did not fire energy beams or launch missiles. They seemed to manipulate space itself, causing enemy ships to simply collapse into impossibly dense points before disappearing completely. "Evasive maneuvers," Grak shouted. "All ships scatter." But the human weapons were faster than the Korvaxi ships. The second salvo eliminated 18 more vessels. The third took out 25. Admiral Grak realized with growing horror that the human ship was not trying to fight efficiently. It was demonstrating different types of weapons. Each salvo used a different technology, as if the humans were showing off their capabilities. "Send a surrender signal," Grak ordered desperately. "Sir," his communications officer replied. "They are not accepting our communications. They appear to be testing their weapons on us." The fourth salvo used weapons that created miniature black holes. 30 Korvaxi ships were pulled into gravity wells that crushed them into nothing. The fifth salvo fired projectiles that moved faster than light itself, arriving at their targets before the weapons were actually fired. In less than 30 minutes, the entire Korvaxi battle fleet was reduced to scattered debris. The TNS Retribution had not moved from its original position. It had not even bothered to maneuver during the battle. Admiral Grak's flagship was the last ship remaining. He waited for the final shot that would end his life. Instead, he received a communication from the human ship. "Admiral Grak," came a calm human voice. "You are being allowed to survive so you can return to your empire with this message. The next Korvaxi fleet that approaches human space will not be used for weapons testing. It will simply be erased." The human ship then did something that defied everything Grak knew about physics. It simply vanished. Not jumped to hyperspace. Not cloaked. It was there. Then it was not there. Grak's crippled flagship limped back to Korvaxi space, carrying news of the most devastating military defeat in galactic history. But the battle at Kepler 442 was just the beginning. Across the galaxy, human cargo ships began revealing their true nature. The massive vessels that had carried goods between systems were actually mobile weapons platforms. The research stations that had quietly observed alien space for centuries activated defense systems that could level planets. The Zephyrian Collective learned this when they attempted to seize human trade assets in their territory. The cargo ship, TNS Prosperity, looked like an easy target when surrounded by 50 Zephyrian patrol vessels. When the ship unfolded into a mobile battle station armed with weapons that fired miniature stars, the entire Zephyrian patrol fleet was vaporized in seconds. The Nexari Commonwealth, always proud of their technological superiority, sent their most advanced warship to investigate a human communication relay near their borders. The TNS Discovery was their finest vessel, equipped with shields and weapons that represented centuries of Nexari advancement. The human communication relay destroyed it with a single shot from a weapon that turned matter into energy and energy into nothingness. Within 48 hours of Admiral Chen's declaration, every major space power in the galaxy had lost significant military assets to human forces. The pattern was always the same. Alien ships would approach what appeared to be a lightly defended human installation, only to discover that they were facing weapons technology that was centuries ahead of anything they possessed. Nexari Commonwealth Admiral Vex called an emergency meeting of his Strategic Council. As the most militarily sophisticated species in the galaxy, they needed to understand what they were facing. "Computer," Admiral Vex said to his AI system, "analyze all available data on human military technology. Provide recommendations for defensive strategies." Number 4. The AI was silent for several long minutes as it processed the information. When it finally responded, its voice carried something that artificial intelligences were not supposed to have. "Fear, Admiral Vex, after analyzing all available combat data, this system can reach only one conclusion. Immediate surrender and reparations to human colonies represent our optimal survival strategy." Admiral Vex stared at his AI system. "Explain your reasoning. Human weapons technology is approximately 500 years ahead of our best systems. Their ships are larger and more powerful than anything in our fleet. Their defensive capabilities make them essentially invulnerable to known weapons. Most importantly, this appears to be their conventional military. Intelligence reports suggest they possess weapons they classify as planet killers that they consider too dangerous for normal use." The AI paused, then continued in a voice that somehow conveyed absolute certainty. "Admiral, we are not facing a military force. We are facing an extinction event with decision-making capabilities." In the Korvaxi Empire, war leader Thrak received reports from every battle group that had engaged human forces. The results were identical: complete destruction of Korvaxi ships with no human losses. The humans were not just winning. They were demonstrating that the Korvaxi military was so inferior that it posed no threat whatsoever. But the most terrifying report came from Korvaxi intelligence. They had finally gained access to pre-contact human historical records. "War leader," the intelligence director said, his voice shaking. "The humans did not conquer their homeworld through superior numbers or resources. They conquered it by developing weapons that could destroy planets. When they achieved spaceflight, their first colonies were military fortresses, designed to fight wars against multiple species simultaneously." Thrak felt his confidence crumbling. What kind of wars? According to their records, they planned for scenarios where every other species in the galaxy would unite against them. Their entire military doctrine is based on fighting outnumbered against technologically advanced enemies. The intelligence director checked his datapad with trembling hands. "War leader, they have been preparing to fight us for 300 years. Not the Korvaxi specifically. All of us. Every species. At the same time." Thrak realized with growing horror what this meant. The humans had not just been building weapons, they had been studying every galactic power, learning their weaknesses, planning for total war against the entire galaxy. And they had been confident they could win. The 72-hour deadline was approaching. Across human space, fleets that had remained hidden for centuries were powering up systems that could reshape the galaxy. The age of human restraint was over. The galaxy was about to learn what 300 years of patient preparation and unlimited resources could create when guided by a species that had perfected the art of war. 6 months later, the galaxy was a very different place. Ambassador Elena Vasquez walked through the corridors of the Galactic Council building, her footsteps echoing in hallways that had been rebuilt after the war. The murals on the walls had been changed. They still showed different species working together. But now humans were depicted differently. No longer the gentle mediators bringing others together. They were shown as the guardians standing watch over galactic peace. Elena's destination was the same council chamber where she had spent decades making compromises. But everything else had changed. The Korvaxi delegations section was much smaller now. What remained of their empire consisted of their homeworld and 3 agricultural colonies. War leader Thrak was gone, executed by his own people for bringing disaster upon the empire. The new Korvaxi representative was a civilian administrator named Kilos, whose job was to oversee the reparations program that would continue for the next 50 years. The Zephyrian collective had fared better, mainly because they had surrendered quickly when they realized what was happening. They still controlled most of their trade routes, though all shipments now required inspection by human customs vessels. Ambassador Zek had been replaced by someone more diplomatic. The Nexari Commonwealth had suffered the least damage, thanks to Admiral Vex's quick thinking. He had ordered his entire fleet to stand down the moment he understood what human military technology could do. The Commonwealth had even offered to share their advanced computer systems to help humans manage the new galactic government. Elena entered the council chamber and took her place at the center of the hall. It was the same position she had always occupied. But now when she spoke, the galaxy listened with complete attention. The Terran Federation has reviewed the resource allocation proposals for the Vega system, Elena announced. We approve the Nexari request for increased mining rights in exchange for providing communication upgrades to human colonies in Sector 7. Nexari Representative Quinn nodded gratefully. The Commonwealth is honored to serve the Terran Federation's infrastructure needs. Elena moved to the next item. Regarding the trade route dispute between the Zephyrian Collective and the Altarian Union, the Federation's decision is final. The route will be shared equally, with human vessels providing security for all merchant traffic. Both sides agreed immediately. No one argued with human decisions anymore. The session proceeded smoothly. Every proposal Elena presented was approved without debate. Every dispute she mediated was resolved exactly as she suggested. The galaxy had learned that arguing with humans was not just pointless, it was dangerous. After the session ended, Elena walked to her private office. Admiral Chen was waiting for her, now wearing the insignia of Supreme Commander of Galactic Defense Forces. The title was new, created after the war, when every species had agreed that human oversight of military matters was necessary for galactic stability. How are the reparations proceeding? Elena asked. Chen consulted her datapad. The Korvaxi have delivered another shipment of rare metals to the New Eden memorial sites. The installation should be completed within 2 years. It will be visible from orbit, as requested. Elena nodded. The New Eden Memorial was not just about honoring the dead. It was a reminder to the galaxy of what had happened when humans were pushed too far. Every ship that visited the system would see the massive structure and remember the cost of genocide. Military situation? Elena asked. Quiet, Chen replied. No species has undertaken any military action without our approval in 3 months. The new fleet protocols are working perfectly. The new protocols required every military vessel in the galaxy to file flight plans with human authorities. Any ship that deviated from approved routes would be intercepted by human patrol vessels. Several species had tested this system in the early weeks after the war. None had tested it twice. Elena looked out the window at the space around the council station. Human ships were visible in every direction. Some, obviously military vessels, and others that looked like civilian craft, but which Elena knew were armed with weapons that could destroy planets. Are we doing the right thing? Elena asked quietly. Chen was quiet for a moment. It was a question she had been asking herself every day since the war ended. 300 years ago, Chen said finally. We chose to be peacekeepers because we believed the galaxy could learn to resolve conflicts without violence. We were wrong about the galaxy, but we were not wrong about the goal. Elena turned to face the Admiral. What do you mean? We have achieved peace, Chen said. Real peace. No wars, no genocides, no attacks on civilians. The price was showing the galaxy what we are truly capable of when restraint is removed. Chen gestured toward the human ships outside the window. Those vessels represent the largest military force in galactic history. They carry weapons that could sterilize every world in known space. But do you know what they spend most of their time doing? Elena shook her head. Protecting trade routes. rescuing ships in distress, providing disaster relief, medical assistance. The same things we were doing 300 years ago. But now no one interferes with our work. Elena considered this. It was true that human activities throughout the galaxy were essentially the same as they had always been. The difference was that now other species helped instead of hindering human efforts. The Korvaxi Empire had been planning to attack the Altarian Union, Chen continued. Our intelligence networks discovered their invasion plans 2 weeks before they intended to strike. We prevented a war that would have killed millions of people. Elena knew this was also true. Human intelligence capabilities, revealed during the war, were far beyond what anyone had imagined. Humans had been monitoring every government, every military organization, and every potential conflict in the galaxy for centuries. But we rule through fear, Elena said. Chen smiled. Do we? When was the last time we actually used military force? Elena thought about this. Since the war ended, human military action had consisted entirely of defensive measures. No human ship had fired a shot in anger. No human weapons had been used against anyone. The Zephyrian mining dispute, last month, Elena said. We threatened military action if they did not withdraw from Rigel 7. We reminded them that Rigel 7 was a protected archaeological site, and that mining there was illegal under galactic law, Chen corrected. We did not threaten them. We simply stated that we would enforce existing laws. Elena realized Chen was right. Human threats were actually just statements of fact. When humans said they would take action, it was not a threat of violence. It was a promise that the law would be enforced. The galaxy is more peaceful now than it has ever been, Chen continued. Trade is flourishing. Exploration is expanding. Scientific cooperation is at an all-time high. Wars have become impossible because everyone knows we will stop them. Elena walked back to the window and looked out at the stars. Human ships moved among vessels from dozens of different species, all traveling safely through space that had once been dangerous. What would happen if we left? Elena asked. If we withdrew our forces and returned to the old way of doing things? Chen was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was sad. Within 5 years, the major powers would be at war again. Within 10 years, we would see another genocide. Within 20 years, the galaxy would be burning. Elena understood. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy through military force. They had accepted responsibility for it. The price of peace was eternal vigilance by the only species powerful enough to enforce it. Do you ever regret it? Elena asked. Do you ever wish we had remained diplomats? Chen looked at the datapad containing casualty reports from the war. Human losses had been minimal. Fewer than 10,000 military personnel killed in action. Enemy losses had been enormous. Over 200 million dead across all species, mostly military personnel but including significant civilian casualties on worlds that had harbored Korvaxi military assets. I regret that it was necessary, Chen said finally. I regret that the galaxy forced us to reveal what we are capable of, but I do not regret saving the millions of people who would have died in future wars. Elena nodded. She understood now why the galaxy had needed to see human military power. Not to conquer, but to prevent conquest. Not to destroy, but to prevent destruction. A message arrived on Elena's personal communication device. It was from the Altarian Union, requesting human mediation in a trade dispute with the Centaurian Republic. It was exactly the kind of request she used to receive regularly, but now it carried an additional note. The Altarian Union expresses gratitude for the Terran Federation's wise guidance and looks forward to a peaceful resolution under human oversight. Quote, Elena smiled. The galaxy had learned the difference between choosing peace and being capable of war. Now they chose peace because they understood the alternative. Outside the window, a human patrol ship escorted a convoy of merchant vessels from 6 different species through what had once been pirate-infested space. The merchants traveled safely because they knew that human weapons watched over them. The galaxy was at peace. Not because everyone had learned to love each other, but because everyone understood that humanity would accept nothing less than peace. It was not the peace Elena had dreamed of as a young diplomat, but it was real peace. enforced by overwhelming power in the hands of those who chose to use it only for protection. The age of galactic warfare was over. The age of human peace had begun, and it would last as long as humanity chose to maintain it.